So, welcome everyone. We're here. We have it's our first session, so we're going to see how this works out. Thanks for everybody who's made it live. We will have a couple of replays, but we're hoping that it should be good crack to be live. Hopefully, we're going to try and get all of you to be come on stage with us. So, what I'll briefly do is just tell you what we have here, and then we can. There we have. Cormac has just joined us from Dungarvan. So we have Rick from Kinnegar, Cormac from Dungarvan, and Johnny from Trouble. And what we thought we'd do is we just get together and we'd kind of have this session that would be just a bit different. We're basically just going to try and chat. It's not an interview. It's not one person at a time. Hopefully we'll just all be talking over each other, and we'll get everybody to come in as well and just ask questions and kind of come on. So what I'll do is I'll just explain what we have. Is we're using this thing called Air Meet, as you've seen. Hopefully some of you got to sit down at the lounge and that you can sit there afterwards and just have a chat. But for this session, what we have is I'll tell you, over on the side you'll see there's a feed where you can just kind of leave messages and that. If you have questions, use the Q&A tab, because then you can upvote people in that. And if you want to come on stage, anything, just raise your hand. Everybody's given lots of spot prizes, so we'll give spot prizes for people who come on and just get involved in that. If you don't understand what's going on, there is actually a closed caption thing down at the end there, but I don't know if it even understands Irish accents, so it's probably not very good. So that's it. So as I said, we have Rick from Kinnegar, we have Cormac from Dungarvan, and we have Johnny coming from Trouble. And I don't know if you want to introduce yourselves, as you're all among the three of the kind of the longest lasting breweries, I guess, at this stage. It's been a load. You've been around for 10 years or so. So I'm sure there's plenty of things you've seen. So maybe if I just want to ask, what we're talking about today is kind of porters and stouts and that. So maybe someone will jump in before we talk about a particular one. And is there a difference between a porter and a stout, or is it just all the same now? Who wants to take that one?
I think Cormac. I think Cormac should answer that. He's been around longer than the rest of us.
What? Sorry, I can't hear it. I missed that.
No, I'm
straight in with the hard questions.
We put down porters and stouts, and I, for one, have a vague idea that I think there might be a difference, but no one that it's just historical, but that they're really the same thing. But I don't know if that's actually true or kind of a midwife's tale or what.
It's a fairly nebulous kind of difference between the two, I think. I mean, it depends on kind of different definitions. If you look at the Brewers Association style guide in America, I mean, they talk about the use of roasted unmalted barley. If it's it's a stout. If it's not, it's a porter. But even that, some porters will have a small amount of roasted barley. Some stouts will have very little. I mean, that in itself is a fairly nebulous thing. I think generally the pattern would be, if it's low on roasted barley and it's a bit lighter bodied, a bit lower alcohol, it normally gets bungled in with the porters. But even that is kind of up for discussion, really.
Right. Yeah, what I had heard was that it was back, basically a stout used to be a stronger porter, and they were the same thing, but one had more alcohol, and then for some reason to do with tax, the weaker ones got pushed out of the market or something. That was what I understood, but I never quite figured it out, to be honest with you. So
I think in modern terms, I mean, we we've taken as Johnny says, it can be pretty nebulous. And we've taken a very we've taken a very undisciplined approach. We call ours a porter, but we do that simply because I find that, especially in Ireland, if you call it a stout, people are actually, most people are expecting a nitrogenated stout. So by calling it a porter, what we're doing is giving an indication to consumers that, look, this is not a substitute product for a Guinness or an alternative product to a Guinness or a nitrogenated stout. So it's really just kind of giving a cue. The way we see it, we're just giving a cue to the consumer to expect something that's a little bit different than what they're used to calling a stout.
Right.
So we personally, we don't stick to, I suppose the historical kind of definitions of stouts and porters. As Johnny described, we don't actually use any roasted barley in the beer that we have here today, Yannaroddy. So it does kind of fit more into the porter category in terms of its composition, but it's really just the way we see it acute to the consumer.
Right. Yeah, because I suppose it's hard, especially in Ireland. Like, you think stout, you think that the iconic kind of Guinness, and that's it with the creamy head, and that's the idea of the stout here. So maybe start, since we've got talking there, Rick. So the Yannaroddy, what, maybe you can describe it, and we can have a go and see how long that's part of your core range, is it?
Yeah, it's probably the fourth beer that we came out with. I think the first beers we came out with, Lime Burner, Scraggy Bay, Rust Bucket, Devil's Backbone. No, it's fifth. So it's been around since the early days of when we started brewing, and we just wanted something that was in the stouter porter category, that was relatively easy drinking. One of the things that we don't kind of put too big on the front of the label is that we actually use coconut in it.
All right.
The coconut, we don't. The idea of the coconut is not that somebody should get this kind of big blast of coconut, like a Bounty bar. The idea is more that the coconut mingles with some of the roasted malts, just to give a slightly kind of a chocolatey character. So it's perceived more as chocolate, I think, than coconut.
Okay. That's interesting. I didn't know there was any coconut in it. I should have researched, I suppose, before we came on. But, so what about?
It's actually what many people don't know is it's a very local ingredient. The coconuts come in on the tide. And we harvest them down on the beach. We kind of bring them up from the beach, and then it's about once or twice a year they come in.
Really? Okay, we had our first technical difficulty here, and just at the point, I had no idea that we were getting coconuts coming in here. Now this is. Sorry, yeah, you're back. So we were just hearing about the coconuts.
We don't.
Okay, I think. Can we hear you?
I can hear you, Brian.
Okay, so you were saying you've naturally harvested coconuts in Ireland in your beer.
Yeah, well, that was a bad joke. No, we don't harvest them off the beach. I did tell that to somebody at a beer. I told somebody that at a beer festival once, though, and they did believe me, and they left thinking that was the truth. So
you had me.
I feel guilty about that.
I was in shock, but you had me. Okay, so now red faced. So what do you think makes it, lads? Have you tried it there? What do you think makes it kind of special, or makes it a bit different?
Well, I've always really loved this beer, and this was one of the first craft beers I actually started drinking when I was a young fella. And it's always been that chocolatiness that I've always really liked about. And now it has it's got a little bit of coffee and then a little bit of chocolate, which I've always liked a lot. And all the while being kind of quite smooth and not super rich.
Right.
I didn't know about coconut, so that's very interesting. I knew that there's, because I always liked that coconut Joe, which you do sometimes as well, which obviously has got a lot more coconut. I've always liked that a lot. I never realised there was coconut in the Yannaroddy.
Yeah. No, I think the expression of it does come across, I think, usually just a bit of chocolate, which is what we're looking. Drinking a Bounty bar, I think, would be a bit unctuous, a bit too heavy.
Sure. And where does the Is it desiccated coconut that you're using?
Yeah, we toast it. Yeah, it just draws the oil out, and then we dry hop with coconut.
Oh,
So what we're doing is we're adding
bit of
So it's going in the dry hopping process, is that what you're saying?
yeah, exactly.
And do you think that? I'm just wondering, like a porter, a stout, is it a more flexible type of beer to brew with, that you can can you do more with it because it's a richer type of beer, or is it harder to kind of do flavors with, or compared to others?
I think it depends. I mean, we were doing just before Christmas, we did a little on our pilot kit in the brewery. We did a chocolate and orange stout that we were trying out. I'm kind of assuming the same as you, that you can play around with it a bit, but I mean, it got much too orangey and much too chocolatey very, very quickly. So I think that you do. There tends to be a very fine tipping point, I find, where it can be not enough, and then it can just fall off the cliff and be undrinkable within a very fine margin, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, we found that as well. Like, I suppose when you have that roasted barley or whatever you have in it going on, there's plenty of, big flavors there anyway, even in a basic stout. And you're adding, even if it's orange, we did with coffee and other things, and it's like, there's nothing, and then not much. Yeah. You're trying to find that sweet spot where, and things like orange, and you have those chocolatey flavors, and they always go well together. And if you can get just enough, that the hint of it there. I mean, I'm drinking this now, and it says coconut on the label, but you wouldn't I can't pick out coconut, but you can see how it would add that little bit extra there. I mean, I think Rick is right in not kind of advertising the fact, because people would be looking for coconut hitting right in the face then, whereas it's there and it's subtle and it's doing something else really. It makes it more interesting. But I find that as well with stouts, that it can take a lot and it can get lost in the mix, and then all of a sudden it can just take over. So it is a bit of a balancing act.
Yeah, I would agree.
And is that something then that you basically don't know that until it comes out at the very end? So you're just kind of trying the next batch with a bit less, and is that how it works then? Or do you have some way of testing it partway through and kind of separating things out, or is it just purely try it all, doesn't work, try it with a bit less and
I find just adding a little bit time after time, adding a little bit, letting it mix, tasting it, adding a bit more, and just knowing when to stop, and making that judgment call of the next edition is going to be a step too far, and not take that extra step, and that's kind of the luck or the skill of it, just stop it.
Right. So you have to be a bit more restrained. You just have to restrain yourself.
Yeah.
So, Liz, I'm wondering if we have some people in the audience here. Do you have any questions? Or any comments? Have you tried the Yannaroddy? Anybody there? Put your hand up if you want to come on. And here's someone. Paul, do you want to come up and ask the question? Let's see if I can invite you on to. You'll be able to do this if I. Excuse me here 1 second. I'm trying to figure out how to work the controls on this thing. This is the problem with going live the first time. I'm still working out the controls. I thought I could do this directly from here, and it turns out I can't. Because Paul has a question here, and Paul, can you do the thing down there, the raising your hand maybe, and we'll get you up. There he goes. Perfect.
Oh, you can hear me again?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just wondering, we've been starting brewing our own beer, And one of the things we tried was adding a flavored coffee. We're also thinking of using syrups that are flavored to, enhance our beer. So I was wondering if any of the breweries use flavored syrups or anything like that. So I think they're very sugary, and they'll have like mint and vanilla and hazelnut and stuff like that. So I wonder if that's an easy way of flavoring the beer.
It can be. I find that those ones are particularly liable to go over the top quite quickly, and I find sometimes they can leave an odd kind of taste in the beer. I would generally kind of prefer more kind of solid additions or like fruit purees and stuff. I think generally work better than the kind of syrups. I think the syrups can kind of get a bit. They can be much more difficult to balance, I find, and to kind of keep under control. But I suppose it kind of probably depends person on person.
Yeah, so from this all, so none of you really go with the syrups. It's more just the kind of the natural ingredients.
Yeah, we've used a little bit of fruit puree, but I think a few years ago we got like free samples of syrup and did a few things just to see how it works, and it was a bit kind of novelty-ish or a bit kind of very quickly over the top and sickly sweet kind of. So yeah, we didn't go any further with that.
Right. Paul, what are you doing? Yeah. You're brewing yourself down there?
Sorry?
No. Oh, you asking me?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, so we just got a kit, and we were doing Coopers, and we were brewing about 44 bottles of stout, and we just thought we'd try a few, just a bit of an experimenting. So we tried a few with vanilla. It worked out quite well. We got these flavored coffees that also worked well. We tried chocolate syrup, which it didn't work. I think it messed up how maybe it's the oils or something. Something in it messed up the head and stuff like that, and it came out sort of brown.
Right.
So, yeah, I'd say it's the fat. It's the fats in the chocolate syrup. I'm sure.
Yeah, that's what we think. Yeah.
Okay, Paul. By the way, since you're the first person brave enough to come up here, we're going to give you a spot prize as well. So we'll arrange some beers to be sent to you from the lag. Since you were the only brave person so far, so maybe someone else will inspire someone else to come and do something as well.
Great, thank you very much. Cheers.
Well, don't thank me, thank them. So we'll arrange that. I'll take your details later, and or I'll send you an email later and get your details and send it on to the people, and we'll get you some beer out.
Grand.
Right, thanks for coming up. If you've got any more questions, do come up, but you're not getting any more spot prizes. So, so I'll let you go. So that's the Yannaroddy. And have you tasted that, Paul, by the way, since you're there?
Yes, so we're drinking it right now. It's very nice. I've had it before. But yeah, we're having the bottle. Just got it today from Ali's in Selbridge. So yeah, very nice.
Good.
Quite roasty, sweet, but very smooth. Yeah, I like it.
Good. So that's good. I don't know. Anybody else have any questions here? So let me just check here. This is the problem with these things. I have to keep jumping around the place to see what people are saying. Mostly. What was I going to ask? Sorry, I've lost my train of thought there. So yeah, that's the Yannaroddy is coconut, which I didn't realize. I should have looked that one up really, but I guess I kind of didn't expect to see a coconut in it, but just So how about you, Johnny? You've got dark arts.
Yeah, so this is probably a bit more of the compared to the other two lads, and this is probably a bit more of a kind of straight up, kind of shooting from the hip, kind of porter, less less adjuncts and stuff in it. So this be, I think this is the only one of our original recipes from the first kind of brews that is still going. So it's our oldest surviving recipe anyway. It's the second or third one the lads did up. And it's a pretty straight up dry porter. So there's no roast barley, but there is a little bit of black, or what's called patent malt, which is barley that's been malted and then roasted to a very high level, to similar levels as unmalted barley. So you get kind of a little bit of astringency and a little bit of bitterness coming through from that, but it's not quite as acidic as the roasted barley will be. We made this originally for nitro, and obviously it's CO2 from the can of the bottle, but we do it on draft nitro as well. You could maybe accuse us of being a little bit at the time looking at Guinness a little bit more, maybe, than the lads were, to be fair to us. But we still went for it as a porter. It still is on the lighter kind of side, compared to most kind of like dry states. It's a bit punchier. It's a bit kind of more of a session kind of porter, I'd say. Good way to go for it.
Right. What do you think of it, Rick or Cormac, compared to the Yannaroddy? How would you describe it?
Well, I've always been a big fan of dark arts. I've had it both in its nitro and its CO2 versions, and I think they both drink quite nicely. I think it's a classic kind of easy drinking porter, but very, very enjoyable. Do you use Johnny and Cormac, do you guys use much in the way of dehusked, as in like the carafa malts for making porters and stouts, or do you stick pretty much to kind of like the standard kind of blacks and the roasted?
We use a little bit of crystal malt in it, not much, a little bit, but mainly looking more. No, it was at the chocolate malt and black malt, and a little bit of flake barley as well, just for head attention. A little bit, but not a lot.
Sorry, it was carafa. It was the dehusked black roasted malts that you get.
No.
Whether you use carafa.
No, not really.
No, we don't either. No.
Okay.
No.
What does that do for it, Rick? What difference does that make?
There's obviously the step in the process before the brewer gets his hands on things is obviously the maltster. So it's the person who is basically preparing the barley for us, and they have a lot of different kind of tricks at their disposal in terms of what they can do to it. There's some specialty maltsters. One of them is Weirmann's in Germany. What they do is they actually strip the husk off the barley before roasting it. And so you can get many of the same flavors that you're looking for, but by stripping the husk off, it tends to keep some of the kind of excessive bitterness of say roasted malts out of it, which is quite interesting. So you can kind of get many of the flavors, but kind of knock back some of the excessive bitterness.
Okay, yeah, this is the thing. I mean, I don't have much clue on this. I have. So I'm the right person to be asking questions, because I know just enough to know what I don't know. So I mean the porter, obviously, I guess it's mainly it's that malt that gives it most of its flavors compared to, say, the hops or the yeast, where they'd be influencing IPAs and wild fermentation. So it would be mainly the malt that affects the stout and porter, is it?
Yeah, I mean, like everything plays its part, but a stout or porter would definitely be what we would call it a malt-driven beer rather than a hops-driven beer or a yeast-driven beer. So it's very definitely the malt which is playing the greater part of the puzzle. Yeah,
that's what I understood. Right. So anybody else got a comment on the dark arts? That anybody in the audience or want to come up and tell us what you think of it. Is it one that you use or that you drink regularly?
You were saying it's there pretty much from the start, has it been, or?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first like 3 or 4 ones that they put out.
Yeah,
and it's the only one I think that's still surviving. Most of the others have been put to bed at this stage.
And is there? Yeah, that brings me like 2 of you. These are the core beers. Cormac, yours is one of the specialties. How important is it to have a good porter stout in your core range, especially in Ireland?
I think it's very important. I think like most consumers would. The time.
And how do you end up changing that then? I mean, if you said like this is the only one that's left from yours, how do they drop out of a core range? Is it just purely sales, or do you just think that you can do better, or you get bored, or?
Like fashion, I think is something that like when Trouble would have been the first few Trouble recipes right in the first Trouble beers. I mean, IPA very much just kind of would have meant either English style or West Coast, for instance. But then as time got on and Ambush got popular and the hazy IPAs got much bigger, we would do less of more West Coast style and more kind of East Coast hazy IPAs and stuff like that. I think drives a lot of it, and just what's in fashion kind of thing.
And then that's purely down to capacity.
Perspective, I think stouts and porters, if we want to call it the craft sector, I think it's probably only responsible for it's less than 5% of the overall kind of sales of the craft sector. So even if we talk about being if Ireland is a stout country, based on Guinness, and you look at the sales of Guinness, that interest in stouts doesn't necessarily translate into the so-called craft sector. It would be very much kind of like more of a niche, part of the.
Right. Yeah, I suppose like when you think about it, people are Irish people like very possessive about the Guinness. It is iconic, and we almost treat it like a crafting because with the settle and the pour and all of that, it's almost treated like a craft beer, even though it's it is what it is. And I mean, it is a decent bite. There's no, when it's done well.
Yeah, but most
kind of like as Rick was saying, I think anybody who makes a stout or a porter, it's not going to be the biggest selling in a range, and there are plenty of brewers out there now that don't even look at doing stouts or porters. But to me, it's kind of you get to instead of just everybody could make hazy IPAs and it'll sell really well, but as a brewery, you get to sort of show or try different things and have a bit of a range, and I think that's important as well, even for breweries to have a bit of a range. It keeps it interesting. Yeah, they're not going to be the biggest sellers, but everybody, as you can see, even by the couple of samples we have here, everybody has their own take on the stout porter category, and there's huge variations out there. So it can be a really interesting sub style, and yeah, it won't be the big seller, but I think it will be very boring if we all decided not to brew them just because they're not big sellers. I just think it keeps it interesting. And you can say that for a lot of different styles. I mean, we can all go where the fashion is going, and as Johnny said, tastes have changed and IPAs are huge. Should we all not bother making stout and red ales and pilsners and everything else, or as a craft? I think it's the broad range that is appealing to people. We started, a lot of breweries started saying we want to give a bit more choice because there isn't much choice out there. So we try to, we have, a lot of different beers that we make, a lot of lads here, and it's all about even giving that choice. Yeah, not everybody will want to drink stout, but people still want the choice. we could very easily turn into kind of this thing where craft beers in Ireland and craft beers everywhere is just hazy IPAs, and suddenly there's no choice anymore. So to me, that's why I think it's important that a lot of different breweries try a lot of different things and keep it more of a broad church. So
yeah, well, that's what comes across, I think, from all the things that craft is. It isn't just a business. Like you have to make it into a business, but no one seems to be doing it just for the business reasons. It is because you want to try out new things, you want to develop new things, and just experiment and just enjoy the beer. So you're willing to take what's almost almost it just to do that.
And it's funny how even Johnny was saying, like when ourselves in Trouble, we pretty much started the same day, and we were the tail end of every brewery that started. You had your stout, your lager style, or whatever it is, and your red ale, and that's what you had. And it was kind of demonstrating your range. Very soon after that, we suddenly had all these newer breweries that said, no, we don't have to do it anymore. We'll just bring out, sours or whatever it is, which is great as well. But I think it's important to maintain these sort of traditions, if you want, I enjoy when I see breweries coming out with, different stouts, different red ales, all these categories that aren't going to be the most popular or biggest sellers, but it's people showing what can be done and keeping the whole range of Irish beers interesting. Not just everybody chasing what's the biggest seller. If we're all in here to make money, I think we're all in the wrong business.
Yeah. It'd be a fairly kind of meager landscape if it was just full of hazy IPAs. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, since we're talking about that, let's move on. So, Cormac Johnny. Does anybody else have any comments on the dark art? What you compared it to against, say, Yannaroddy? If there's what would strike you as the difference, and then we'll move on maybe and talk about special, the coffee and oatmeal. No one from the unions. I do have a question here from Brendan Carroll. He can't come on stage, he says, but he's wondering, Johnny, if you're going to do dark art on Cask.
Yeah, we do. We don't we usually do Cask for the dark arts probably one every 2 months or so. So we've usually got one in either Black Sheep or Underdog. So I think when things are opened up again, we'll be looking to get probably one Cask dark arts into either of those. Would be what I hope, anyways. Because I definitely like it on Cask best. That's where it's the best way to drink dark rails personally. So I'd back that.
So yeah, that's good news there, Brendan. Actually, we don't have enough people coming on stage, so I'm finding it hard now to give away prizes here. Somebody come on and talk to us so we can give away some of these people's T-shirts next. We're waiting for that. I also have to do the one for the tweet. Who did the tweet? And I don't think we have enough people on live today, but when they see the replays, they might come on live the next time. So yeah, Cormac, you've got the coffee and oatmeal, so this isn't your core range. It's not seasonal either. You don't do it every season, is it? It's a special.
Well, we do it every winter.
You do? Okay.
Yeah. We don't call it a Christmas beer. We don't have a Christmas beer, but usually about November or so, we bring out a batch of this. So yeah, it's not year round. We have our Black Rock as our year round stout, this is just something. I think we've done it about nearly 10 years now, so it's a fairly regular seasonal. There is roasted barley in this. There's also chocolate malt and a few other bits, and the oats, obviously, we get from Flavin's. We're only down the road from us. And which kind of, I find the oats just kind of add a bit of a sort of a creaminess to the texture of it. And then every year we put a different coffee into it. it's Badger and Dodo again, who are about 40 minutes the other direction from us, and we kind of go to them and say, what's new and interesting in the coffee world, because I don't know, I like to drink coffee, but their finger on the pulse of it, and they come up with a few suggestions, and we might do a couple of tastings and see what we think will work well with in a stout. And yeah, so every year we pick a different coffee. So every year it's obviously going to be slightly different, and it just kind of keeps it interesting.
And where do they come into the brewing process then? The oatmeal and the thing, is it, where do you add them?
The oats go in with the grist, so they're in the mash, and we add the coffee. Then we add in the fermenter. We brew an oatmeal stout, and then we add coffee to it. We experiment with different stages of adding the coffee, and we just find we can get better, I suppose, consistency of flavor adding it. Then, I know some people add the roasted beans into the mash and things like that, but we tend to just add the coffee into the fermenter with it. And as Johnny was saying earlier, like we kind of, we'll add some coffee, we'll taste it, we'll add some coffee, we'll taste it, and it can be like no coffee, and then you hit that sweet spot, then all of a sudden it's too much coffee. So each year you're trying to find that sweet spot. So I know people say to me every year, either there's not enough coffee or there's too much coffee in it. So I think when you have half the people say neither thing, I think we're fairly spot on. I suppose for me, I've had coffee beers which are literally like a pint of coffee, and I find that a bit off-putting. I just wanted a subtlety there, and that's what we try and aim for.
Cormac, do you find that certain styles of coffee work better than others? Like more more darker roasts or lighter roast, more acidic, more. Are you finding that you've seen?
We discovered that very early on. We discovered that very early on, and I go up to Badger and Dodo, and we'll taste some coffees. And what I would consider a nice cup of coffee usually doesn't work when you put it in the context of in the beer. So the last couple of years there've been more kind of Ethiopian strains, but I think at the start we tasted this lovely kind of Colombia, and it was like rich chocolatey. That's lovely. You put it into the stout, then it's completely lost. So some of the coffees we've had over the last few years, as a coffee, they're not very nice. The bean is, and so you get a lot of kind of red berry kind of, those kind of fruity flavors to it. Yeah. So it makes for a slightly peculiar coffee on its own, but then those flavors come through better in the beer. And on the chocolatey end, it gets lost in the dark.
Yeah. They're a bit brighter, more acidic and fruitier.
Exactly, and it just kind of, I suppose, comes through a bit more in the beer, and you can say, okay, that's the coffee. And it's funny, then you taste that coffee on its own. It's like, it wouldn't be my favorite cup of coffee on its own. You need to blend it with something. But we found that, any kind of typical coffee, kind of traditional with your coffee and, your kind of chocolatey, roasty kind of flavors, you have all that going on already in the stout, so you don't need to add that.
Yeah, exactly.
It just means we tend to go for more offbeat, kind of different kind of beans. Again, stuff that are normally used in the coffee world, blended with other ones to get your coffee. But so we found that works for us anyway.
And do you end up trying a lot of different coffees every year to get the right one, or do you just try and go with the first one you have, like try and pick it right the first time based on the advice from the coffee people?
I suppose we kind of have an idea now what works, what kind of styles, flavor profiles will work or not. But then they can say, hey, we've this brand new one in here. We just got in from wherever around the world and has this kind of flavor profile. Say, okay, let's try that and see. We'd normally try and whittle it down to a couple, and then we'll bring back to the brewery and decide. Some years it's just a straight, with this new interesting bean, and like, you can nearly just read out the flavor profile. You said, we know that's going to work. Send me down some of that and we'll try that. And other years you kind of say, no, actually, we need something different.
Right.
Yeah, but you kind of have an idea now what works or what to avoid, really. If it says chocolate on the description, then it's not going to come true. You have all that chocolate going on. We have chocolate malt in there. We've roasted malts in there already that are giving all that flavor. So you have something else to add to the mix, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, plenty of coffee drinking and experimenting.
What do you lads think of it?
I really love it. And I think you're spot on there in saying that it's about keeping the coffee down rather than up. And I don't know how many coffee steaks I've had over the years that are just vile. I don't drink coffee, so it's just like drinking a pint of espresso or something. It just knocks me out. And I like the fact that this like keeps it, subdued. So it's there and it complements it, but it doesn't go overpowering because that's just something that it triggers me. Coffee steaks, and it's too much. So I love the fact that it gets that, and I really love you've got the oatmeal in this, and spot on. Texturally, it's really right where it should be. It's got that softness and that smoothness. Just kind of works so well. Particularly coffee steaks, it tends to work so well.
Yeah, I think it's like with any any flavors you add to beers. I mean, if you go over the top, they kind of almost turn a bit novelty like. You taste one and say, oh yeah, I get that coffee hit or whatever it is, fruit or whatever. But for something you want it to be drinkable, I think you need to be more subtle with it. That's what I find anyway. Yeah, that hint of coconut, hint of coffee, whatever.
Exactly.
Not being overboard or anything.
I think to a certain extent you've got to let the beer do enough of the talking as well, and not just kind of make it all about your flavours. And I certainly find that particularly when I'm home brewing, it's very easy just to want to make it kicky and big and brash. And particularly when I'm home brewing, I have to kind of dial that back a lot and you get a better product really usually doing that.
Yeah.
And sorry, go on.
Yeah, I think that balance is just so important to beer because okay, you can say I want to get a big blast of a particular flavor, but when I drink beer, it's not that I want to overconsume, but I like to have a couple. And if you're getting really kind of overwhelming kind of flavors, it just doesn't. You're just not able to actually kind of consume that after a while. Sometimes you go to festivals and try different beers, and you get these absolutely kind of amazingly powerful flavors coming off of a few things. But I remember being at a festival in Brussels a couple of years ago, and every brewery there had these kind of big imperial stouts on, and between the alcohol and the flavors, you could manage a thimbleful, like literally a thimbleful. It was just so overwhelming, and a lot of it just didn't have that balance. And if you want to sit down and beer, yes, it should be a flavor experience, but it's a social experience. You want to sit down and have a couple of beers with somebody. You don't want to be kicked in the head each time. You take a sip of the beer. As what Cormac and Johnny have said is absolutely like the balance needs to be there. Otherwise, it's not really enjoyable.
I think that's probably a lot of maybe in the craft brewing, not necessarily in Ireland, but craft brewing in America, that they seem to have gone way over the top to get attention. And at least in the early days, it was all 30% alcohol and hops everywhere, and it just they went very extreme.
Yeah, there's a place to be extreme as well, and it's great to be pushing the boundaries. As Rick said, sometimes that place is just at a beer festival where you take little sips and say, wow, this is, full on this and full on that. But, that's not necessarily the beer you want to sit down and have a couple on a Friday night watching TV or something, So there is a place for everything. I'm not saying people shouldn't be bold and push the boat out. But for me, for my personal taste, and that's, I suppose, what comes through in the beer is like, this is the kind of beer I want to be able to come sit down and drink a few of and, not be totally overwhelmed by coffee or whatever the dominant flavor is. There's a place for everything, really.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, like the beers you all do, it's all what you like to drink yourselves. It's not necessarily going for what you think the big market is. It's something you'd enjoy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's often where a lot of the really kind of overpowering and overly infused beers kind of come from, is a desire to, in a crowded marketplace, kind of stand out or make a splash or make an impact or be different. And at the end of the day, if the beer backing it up maybe isn't of that quality and you're just kind of looking for a short fix and looking for kind of an easy headline almost, I think that will shine through, and the beer it won't work and it won't be balanced and it won't be right, and that's why we get beers that do have really, really intense flavors and are really heavily infused. That could be brilliant. I mean, I remember I had the Speedway Stout from Alesmith there a few months ago. I got my hands on a can of it, and it's loaded. But it was brilliant. It was really good, and that's because the stout underneath it was excellent, and it was done right. But often, just when they're over infused, it can be kind of it's attention grabbing almost, and then it just usually isn't I find.
Yeah. Cormac, yours in Dungarvan, everything you do is bottled. It's in bottle, and it basically keeps fermenting in the bottle. Is it? It's bottle conditioned.
It's not all bottled.
Yeah.
This must be a national first. This is probably the first Irish can conditioned beer, isn't it, Cormac?
You know what? I've learned a long time ago to never claim to be the first, because you'll have someone straight onto Twitter say, actually. So I don't know that, but yeah, we used to bottle everything. I mean, at the start we bottled everything, and then it's bottle conditioned, and then as a natural progression, we started putting beer in cask, even just for beer festivals. And then the last few years we've done a little bit of keg. Most of that just stays local now. And as Rick just showed there, we've started experimenting now with cans. Apparently cans are in, who knew? It's funny because a few years ago you had the likes of probably Metal Man were one of the first, there's a couple in their toe in it, and you're kind of, there's probably a lot of people hanging back saying, let's see how this goes, but cans are huge. And I suppose we were just, toying with the idea over the last few years of, we bottle condition, and should we start canning as well? And let's try can condition. And we've done a few trials just to see if it's something we can go with. So hopefully over the next few months we'll try and bring out some of our beers in cans and see how it goes. But the can condition as well, which is another little challenge for us. Interesting time.
So have you have
it all on the shelves of the office? Sorry, Brian. I was just going to say it's amazing to see the change over the last few years, where it's like can is becoming the dominant, and so
because
it's about time we.
What does that change the taste of the beer, or is it something that you can control now? Will it end up slightly different because from the bottle conditioned?
I mean, technically it shouldn't. I mean, it's the same beer. We're going to treat it the same, pretty much as possible as if it was being bottled. So we're while we were doing a few trial batches, we were trying to keep the process pretty much the same. But you do the same when you put into a cask, and people would say it's a completely different beer from the cask. There's what happens within the container, and then there's probably people's perception as well. So it'll be interesting to see. We'll find out soon enough, I suppose.
That's the Black Rock Stout from the can, Cormac, and it tastes wonderful. It looks great. So,
cheers, Rick. Yeah, I think that's the first one that left Dungarvan, I'd say, anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. We don't even have a proper label. That's just a bottle.
You in terms of getting your CO2 volumes correct, I mean, you must be, the absolute experts at it when it comes to the bottle conditioning. Are you having to change much in terms of the way you deal with CO2 in the can conditioning?
Yeah, we find it's just altered slightly. You know, we've had a lot of help and input. The lads from Dot Brewery, actually, I think they do some of their seasonals and conditions. So we got a bit of advice from them as to how they found it. And yeah, and that's part of the process, just tweaking that as well. Yeah, the level of carbonation you want in the can compared to the bottle. Yeah, so there's little tweaks like that we're just playing around with. Hopefully, yeah, we'll get there with something.
It'll be interesting to see, but yeah, I was amazed by how the cans came on as well. They came out of nowhere, really, because even outside of Ireland, probably a lot of it, it's still bottle is the main way. Well, outside of maybe English-speaking countries, maybe I'll put it that way, because in America they'd be big in cans, and in England, but you look at Belgium or something, like it's still primarily bottles and bottle editioned.
Although you are seeing now, I mean, the Shop started doing cans there a year ago, and some of the traditional Belgian breweries are starting to transition, which surprised me. I kind of never thought they would change. I never saw that coming.
Yeah, I saw that. All right, that some of them were doing it, but yeah, it's surprising because I don't know. I think I'm old-fashioned. That pouring it from a bottle feels different to me from pouring it from a can. It just viscerally, it just feels like it's the bottle is something nicer. That's from my age, I suppose, but yeah, it feels different. I was wondering whether it changed the flavor, whether that's why a lot of them were resistant, or is it just tradition? As you said, like a lot of the Belgians in particular. But yeah, I think
it is tradition. I think it's also kind of, but everybody has their perception about what packaging format should be used, and by all accounts, from a technical perspective, the can would be, the better packaging format for the freshness of the beer. If everything is, if the cans are being filled properly. But yeah, there is kind of a lingering perception that a better quality beer comes in a bottle. Yeah. The other thing you have is, if you've got, depending on, like a lot of the big, depending on, how you're treating the beer before it goes into a can, if you're making a beer with wild yeast or Brettanomyces in it, you need to make sure that's, that's one of the reasons why you'll find, like, a Guinness, or it's going to be in a very heavy gauge bottle with a cork and crown, because you've got pressure issues in the in the package, because basically these wild yeast strains will keep going and going and going. So if you put that into a can, you've got to be aware of potential problems of cans exploding on the shelves. So I mean, some of them do pasteurize before they package now, so they're they would be killing the yeast, but it just depends on the type of beer you're making, as well as and whether or not it's suitable for a can.
Right. Yeah. Well, I suppose, yeah, it's some tradition. I mean, it's the same thing to do with wine, really. Like, the New World wines all have screw tops, and they're probably better for, if you're going to be drinking it anytime, any bit fresh. But yeah, there's still people like to take the cork out of the bottle.
Even from an aging point of view, I mean, beers that are meant to be aged, some of the wines that are meant to be aged, you're almost better having a cork or having a less than 100% seal to allow a small amount of oxidation for the yeast. So certainly, I mean, French wines that are with cork do typically will age to a very low complexity than a lot of screw top wines, and I would suspect the same would be the same for canned beer. If it's a Belgian quad or a barley wine that you want to keep for 3 or 4 years, you probably are better off maybe having it in the bottle in that regard.
Yeah, so it's all about, well, a lot of it about age and about the type of, whether the yeast is still alive or not. And how fresh you're going to drink the beer after it's made. Interesting though, it's still, the demand for it kind of strikes me that, it's not a brewer pushing it because it's easier to keep on the shelves or do anything. It's that it's demand driven, that people want the cans. And you always see that when something is finally on can or something like that, people seem to celebrate it.
Yeah, there's certainly I feel there's for and against, and even some just practical, like, cans are easier to carry and stack and whatever, things like that. Even people like to see. Yeah, and then there's also maybe pure perception, but people like to open a bottle of
Yeah. No, it's anyway. That's just an aside, but it is interesting how it's gone and how.
Oh yeah, it's interesting how, like, as I said, over the last probably 5-6 years, it's really taken off. I'd said we'll probably still bottle most of ours, but it'd be nice to have option of having some in cans as well. So I put in both camps, I suppose. Probably similar discussions like when everything went from cask to keg there about 50, 60 years ago. Like everything for like kegging is all quality and consistency and everything, but people are still like, oh yeah, but we want cask coming because you like that bit of unknown or the uniqueness to it. So there's like you probably get that with the cork beers as well, or like you said, your wines. I mean, probably less spoilage in a screw cap wine, but people want that tradition as well. Just trying to balance it too.
Yeah, I suppose it's like if you're there, it's drinking a beer, drinking wine. It's not just the beer or wine; it's the experience. It's the where you are and the people you're with, and the experience of opening it, and it's everything.
Yeah, but you can also get that with cans now as well. People are selling that different type of experience, I suppose.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't be far against either one. It is interesting to see how the market has changed. I think there's a question there about the 440 mil. I'll leave that one to Johnny because I have no idea where 440 mil came from, but they're a nice size, I think.
Pass it off to me. I'm afraid I don't actually know exactly why that became the standard. Trouble switched to 440 mil cans before I joined, so I can't say why that was the rationale. I'm afraid. I don't know. To be honest, I really don't know.
If I were to hazard a guess at it, this is from Brandon.
It's kind of like the schooner, the 2/3 pint. It is a nice size, I suppose. And maybe it differentiates from.
Is it?
I'm not sure.
I think it also
it kind of differentiates from other cans in the supermarket, the off license as well, I suppose. It's almost like the craft size now, which is interesting.
Yeah,
but it also allows people to hit a different price point. I think that might be it's if somebody's going in and they're buying a certain number of 500 ml cans, the overall price is going to be higher than if it's 440 ml cans or a 440 ml can. So it allows, I think, for a lot of breweries, it just means that you can have the beer on the shelf at a price point which is maybe more conducive to the consumer. It's if your can is on the shelf for $3.10 as opposed to $3.75 or whatever it might be, even though.
No, sorry, I think everyone just froze for me there.
All right. Okay. No, sorry. I'm going to bring Noel up here. I don't know. He wants to. Noel.
Yeah. Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, first of all, I just want to say thanks a million. It's been very interesting listening to the three of you talk, and thanks, Brian, for organising it. Fantastic. I've enjoyed having a little taste of each of the beers. I didn't drink them entirely because it would have been too much at this time on a Saturday. But it's been really lovely listening to you guys. I did wonder, what do you think internationally? I know you've talked a lot nationally, Ireland, and I think we kind of have a real heritage with Stout and with Porter. But do you find sales internationally change, or the tastes change internationally for Stouts and Porters?
I think so. I lived for a year in New Zealand, working in the beer industry there, and I found that there was as little as Stouts are major sellers here. Over in New Zealand, it was barely a factor. Where I was working, I was trying to persuade the people to buy in Stouts, things like that, and they were having none of it. So there was no stout culture there at all. A lot of people were very dismissive of the idea of stout, and those that were tended to be much lighter, and they were all porters. Rich, dry stouts didn't exist. So I think I was certainly quite outside in my experience. There's been a bit of difference, certainly between Ireland and New Zealand anyway.
Anyone else got an opinion on kind of foreign opinions of porter? Is it all? Do you think it's all driven by Guinness as well? Probably is.
I think in the States.
Sorry, I missed that question there. I lost you for a second.
No, we're just asking about. Sorry, Noel, I'll let you.
I think in the States that the culture is definitely driven by Guinness. Like most people actually in the States view Guinness as a craft brewery. They don't see it as being maybe kind of like a large multinational in the same way that we do here. So if you're looking, in the States on the craft side, I don't believe there's a lot of interest in stouts and porters. It's probably a smaller niche than it is here. And as far as the majority of people in the States are concerned, Guinness is a craft beer, and that's the one that will kind of still dominate. On the continent, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't think it's a very it's not a big demand category. Even as an Irish brewery, kind of say selling a bit of beer in France or Italy. It's they're not. It's not our porters or our ambers, our red ales that are really kind of in demand. We sell a small amount, but it's not where the real demand is.
Okay. Noel, are you still there? Yeah, because I know. Well, I'm surprised that there isn't much, because I thought, I suppose it depends how you classify. Like brown beers, dark ales are reasonably popular on the continent, I think. Whether they count them as porters or stouts, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, you can see different darker beers, but I think they tend to be sweeter. Like they're when you're looking at dark beers in the States, they tend to be in the continent, they tend to have a very definitely kind of a sweeter component to them.
Right.
Germany with dark lagers, they tend to be quite sweet. And most of them it's a very different. Sorry, Johnny?
Just the doubles over in Belgium, the dark ones tend to be, again, on the sweeter side.
Yeah. And you don't get quite that roasted impact. It's a slightly different kind of characteristic to it.
Right. Listen, guys, I promised to try and keep it to an hour, and we're just running over. So let me just take Noel there. I'll get in touch with you in a while, because you were brave enough to come up. We'll get you a nice pack of T-shirts and stuff from Trouble as well. And we had this tweet that we were doing, and I'm trying to see who was retweeting and who was live. And out of the first few people I picked, there was no one here. Well, Brendan, Carol, you're getting the 3 T-shirts. One each from Trouble, Kinnegar, and Dungarvan. Thank you very much. And listen, guys, I promise to keep it short. I think I'm running over a little bit of time, but thanks a million for your time. It was very interesting. I think just hearing kind of the cross of what what the different opinions were and what thing. I think it was a quick hour. I know it flew by for me anyway. So I'll just say thanks. Has anybody got anything else they just want to say? One last question before we go. Looks like no. So I think what we'll do is next week we have. What do we have next week? Next week we have. Oh, it's all about yeasts. We have. Where's my thing here? Right. We have canvas. We have. So we have Black Donkey and White Hag coming on, just talk about yeast and sours and that. So that should be interesting. Hopefully it'll be as interesting as this was. We're going to have a replay available tomorrow, and we might just do it one. Might have it available during the week as well. And that's basically it. I think it was a lot of fun. So I want